Attention, due to the nature of the films discussed, the Civil Gore podcast may contain adult language and themes.
Brian, is this a dream again?
I don't know, why?
Because why else would we be sitting in this rundown comedy club in Springwood, Ohio? Don't we have better things to be doing?
Like what?
Like recording our latest episode of Civil Gore?
Yes, but I think we can get some stuff for our show in here.
Here? How could this place help us in any way?
You'll find out soon enough. Oh, okay, get ready. Looks like the show's about to start.
Live from Hollywood Boulevard, it's the Crypt Keeper!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Die Laughing, the comedy club where all your favorite horror icons perform stand-up comedy. I may be a little biased, but I think all these acts kill. Our headliner is still getting ready backstage, but we have some opening acts that are sure to leave you in stitches. Our first performer enjoys flaying, torture, and needlepoint. Your laughter will be legendary, even in hell. Give it up for Pinhead!
What do you get when you cross an elephant and a flamingo? 1,000 millennia of unbearable pain and suffering. Why did the chicken cross the road? To escape the realization that his existence was devoid of meaning and that he would die alone.
Ooh, it's always hard to see a performer die on stage. You might say that act Cenobites. Let's move right along with our next performer. An outdoorsy guy. He loves to camp but hates water. Give it up for a true mama's boy, Jason Voorhees.
Stop it! Cut it out! Okay, all right. Thank you. Wow, big crowd. I'm a bit of a loner, as you may have heard. I don't have much luck with the ladies. The good ones always seem to get away. It's true. People say, Jason, why the mask? Have you seen my face? I tried to enter an ugly contest one time. They said, sorry, no professionals. I'm the reason Slenderman has no eyes, people. It sucks being so ugly. The only way I can bang a chick is against a tree. Repeatedly. People like to say I'm a mama's boy because I keep a raggedy old sweater and rotted head in a shrine. I say I'm just being a good son because without me, she ain't got no body. I once had someone come up to me and ask me how I kill time between camp seasons. So I took out my machete and chopped up a clock. I tell you though, teenagers today, they drive you crazy, but you can't kill them. Oh wait, yes you can. People ask me why I'm so full of rage. Wouldn't you be angry if you had no friends, had to eat roadkill, and was killed by one of the Goonies?
Let's give it up for Mr. Voorhees. That was great, unlike most of your sequels. I'm kidding. Let's bring up our next performer, a guy who's been slaying audiences since childhood. The myth, the legend, the shape, Michael Myers.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. People say, Mike, you really love Halloween. Are you kidding me? I hate Halloween. It's the only holiday where people actually try to kill me. You try to burn me, shoot me, stab me in the face with a coat hanger, run me over, throw me down a pit, and I kill a few whiny teenagers and I'm the bad guy. Speaking of those teenagers, what's the deal with babysitters? I don't see them sitting on babies. I mean, wouldn't you think that's what they should be doing? Babies are great for sitting. They're soft, they stop crying if you sit on them long enough. I don't get it. People call me the boogeyman. Ooh, look out, here comes the boogeyman. Really? I murdered over 100 people. The best nickname I can get is somebody that sounds like they still love disco? And what's with this tagline? The night he came home? Who are the ad wizards that came up with this one? Can you imagine these guys coming up with the slogan for The Exorcist? The night her head spun around. The night she threw up pea soup. No, not Wednesday night, the other one. The night where she jammed a crucifix up her. Yeah, that one. You know, it's tough dating when you're a serial killer. I mean, I think I have something to offer. I've got a station wagon, I've got a house, pretty good sense of humor. Some folks think I look like William Shatner. I mean, I'm better looking than this next guy. Freddy? I've seen frozen pizzas with better complexions. That's my time. You've been great, ladies and gentlemen.
Just when I thought the show was shaping up to be a good one. But now, it's time for the act you've been staying awake for. Just don't get me to scratch your back. Freddy Krueger!
Hello! Good to be here. Good thing those opening acts put you to sleep. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see me. So that Jason is sure a downer, am I right? If only he found a way to mask his emotions. Hey, I don't blame him for covering up that mug. It was starting to give me nightmares. So being burned all over my body, I thought I'd never meet anyone, so I decided to use an online dating site. I figured the most appropriate would be Match.com. I tell you though, you know what really burns me? The parent from Elm Street! I've been golfing quite a bit lately, although the other golfers hate me. I think it's because I intentionally slice. He started up with me once, so I put a hole in one! So kids are a handful, right? Anyone in the crowd have kids? Great, what's your address? Just kidding. I already know the address. Well, remember, this club has a 2-dream minimum, and don't forget to script your waitresses.
There, that's our show for the evening, boils and ghouls. Frighty fright!
Wow, that was something else. What did you think, Brian?
Kinda thought it was like the Nightmare on Elm Street series. The more Freddy tried to be funny, the more it sucked.
Hey, that's a brilliant concept for a podcast episode. We have to wake up and record this. Wake up, Brian! Wake up! We have to wake up! Wake up, Brian! Wake up! Ooh, sorry, Brian. I dozed off for a second right before we started recording.
Oh, no worries. I think I did the same, actually.
Yeah, it was terrible. I had this crazy dream, like we were in this terrible comedy club full of these really bad comedian impersonators.
Oh my god, that's weird. That's almost the same thing I dreamt.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, you know what? At least it gave me some ideas for this episode.
True. We might be running out at this point.
Yeah. So, welcome everybody to Civil Gore. I almost said Civil Gore again.
Again with that.
Did you hear
wow.
me? I don't know. I can't pronounce our own podcast
That's
show.
not good.
And I have not been drinking tonight.
I know.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, no, right. You got coffee going on now.
Yeah, I got coffee. So I'm trying to stay awake.
Boom. Okay.
Yeah, episode 22. This is the second part of our Freddy Krueger two-parter, which is part of our Summer Slaycation series, in which we take a look at a famous horror movie villain. We're doing an 8-week series, and to get you through the hot summer months.
Yeah, and and this one I think no matter what, even if we didn't plan on doing the 2-week scheduling, I think this one would have to be. It's just too much. As we mentioned last week, the sequels are so uniquely different as they continue on in the series that it really needed its own episode to just go through the sequels.
Right. Yep. And I had a great time going through these. Like we mentioned on last episode, me and Brian went through all of the movies again in preparation for this episode in particular, and had a really good time.
Yeah, it was fun. I'm actually a little more excited, even though obviously I think we both agree that the first original film is our favorite. I think I was looking forward to this episode a little more, just because it gives us such a varied bunch of topics to talk about in terms of the sequels.
So let's get right into it with our first chop. So I haven't really been watching a lot of horror movies lately, Brian, because we binged out on the Freddy stuff so much that really took all of my time. But I was doing some bathroom remodeling this weekend, so we ended up just kind of looking for something on Netflix to watch, and I started watching the Twilight Zone series again, the original.
Oh, nice.
And Olivia kind of got hooked on them too, so we just were like binge watching these Twilight Zone episodes, and even at one point even the kids got in on the action, so they really liked them as well.
Yeah, I have that complete box set. That was one of the sets that there was, and I want to eventually upgrade to the Blu-ray because I just heard they look even more fantastic than the original DVDs. I have that whole set too. The Twilight I could watch, like they used to it used to be on Channel 11 near me, but now I think Sci-Fi does it, right, where they do the marathon on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, they do the New Year's marathon. I used to record a bunch of those when they did that.
Yeah, those are great. I mean, there's so many. I mean, we really actually should dedicate an episode down the road for some of our best Twilight Zones, because I know I can think of a ton of them, and then you even want to even mention the 80s version, which had some gems. It had, believe it or not, I mean, usually the remakes are never as good, but the remake of the Twilight Zone had some true gems in it. So I'd love to go over that one time.
Yeah, at some point I wouldn't mind doing a whole episode on just TV anthologies.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Because there's a bunch of them, like the Outer Limits, you got Twilight Zone, you got Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Tales from the Dark Side. I mean, there's
Tales from the Dark Side. Yeah, there was one back in the early '80s that I can't.
Oh,
remember.
was it the Ray Bradbury Theater? Because those were fantastic.
Yeah, there's that one. Night Gallery was another good one. So yeah, that'd make for a good episode, kind of reviewing those. There's some that I want to watch a little more thoroughly, but.
Yeah,
I've kind of gotten hooked on these anthologies. I'm also, speaking of Freddy, I'm kind of in the middle of Freddy's Nightmares series.
Oh, where is that? Is that available somewhere?
Yeah, I think it's available on DVD.
Oh, okay. I gotta look for that.
Not on Blu-ray, but it's really bad.
Yeah, no, I remember it not being as good. I'm looking. It's funny you said that. I'm looking at the Friday the 13th the series, which obviously, as you know, had nothing to do with Jason in it, but I have that one there too, and I'm like, it's like it's a shame when you first heard those two series were coming out with a television show. I remember I was like, oh my god, a Friday the 13th TV show, that's gonna be amazing, and then it was nothing like it. And I don't remember any of the episodes, but I do intend to watch through that box set at some point though.
Yeah, well, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in our rundown because speaking of TV anthologies, one of the best was HBO's Tales from the Crypt.
Right.
Which we thought we were getting a reboot of.
Yeah, and then suddenly today I saw an article that says, no, we are not.
Yeah, now I had heard a while back that it was probably going to be canceled. And then I've also seen, like I mentioned before to you earlier today, I saw one article that said they thought that it still may be a possibility once they get some licensing issues straightened out. So I'm kind of holding out hope that it's not completely dead.
Right, because think about it. The Crypt Keepers, he needs a job. If this series doesn't come out, he's going to end up doing like emceeing at some kind of bad comedy club or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But the good thing is though is that Twin Peaks the new series had the same issue where it was all greenlit and it was a whole big thing, and then David Lynch backed out, and because they wouldn't let Showtime wouldn't let him do what he wanted to do, and there was a whole back and forth. But there was some begging involved, and as you know, it is back, Twin Peaks, and it's getting, oh my god, I haven't watched last night's episode yet, but so far it's getting really, really like good, and like you're just getting to that, like you can feel the culmination of this series like approaching, and I think it's gonna be a great payoff in the finale. So look, if you want to compare something that at one point was considered dead in the water, and look, it came back, and there it is. So hopefully this will be the same ending for Tales from the Crypt.
Cool. And then you also had something here about, while we're on the subject of TV, a history of horror TV series.
Yeah,
on AMC.
I posted that on our Facebook page. I hadn't seen anything about it until today, and so supposedly it's coming out, and there's a series that AMC is doing called AMC Visionaries, and I guess it takes a genre and takes a known participant in that genre. Like they're having James Cameron's science fiction, and I guess it's a 6-part sequence for each genre. So and they tapped Eli Roth to do Eli Roth's History of Horror. So that's gonna be a 6-part season or whatever and I don't know what they call it, but so I don't know, I kind of think of like that Ken Burns series, Ken Burns Baseball or Ken Burns Civil War, whatever he had. And so I think there's gonna be like little mini super documentaries, I guess. And so I don't know, they didn't say much about it other than that Eli Roth is going to go through the history of the genre, which I just think that'll be a really cool series. So AMC usually does some good stuff, so I know we'll have to keep a good eye on that. So supposedly it debuts in 2018. So, and I guess while we're on the TV, we might as well hit the next one before I go back to the other one, which just as I know it's not true horror, but just to let everybody know, on Sunday, August 6th at 8 p.m., it's Sharknado 5, Global Swarming, which if you've not seen that series, it is so bad it's good, and it's just so much fun to watch.
I love the series. Yeah. I just totally love Sharknado.
Yeah, it's so bad. And supposedly there's a teaser of, if you saw the trailer for it, that something called Sharkzilla appears. So whatever the heck that is, that's worth watching alone.
I thought they couldn't top the last one. I really did, but apparently they're going to.
And I love was that the last one, the Universal one, or the one before that was Universal? 3 was Universal, right? I think, where they had all the Universal.
I think so.
That was my favorite.
I know that at one point they were in space.
I think that was last one. Yeah, last one was in space. So and I mean, for those of you who've not seen it, I think they're all on Netflix, but I think they were doing a whole marathon this week leading up to it. So it may start some point this weekend, or I don't know. Check your Sci-Fi Channel schedule, because they usually leading up to the new Sharknado movie, they have all the other ones played. So I think I saw one of them slated for this weekend before it. So do yourself a favor. You want some mindless fun, watch those movies. They are so freaking hilarious and so great. But so that'll cover our so we had a lot of TV first chops tonight. That's new. But our final one I'll mention in our first chop today is, as you know, I mentioned the last time I went to the Chiller Show in April. Well, Chiller Show actually started with originally just doing it in October, and then they expanded to April. Actually, at one point they had 3 a year, where they had one in January, but I think the guests were running way too thin. They just couldn't keep up with it. So now they went back to their usual October/April, and they started announcing some October guests already. And when I first saw it, there wasn't really anything of merit, but it was early, so I don't get too excited yet. But our good friend Steve Cohn, who is our favorite person to slash up in Friday the 13th, the video game, he actually sent me a text. He said, "Look at this," and he sent me a screenshot of the Chiller guest list. They are having a Nightmare on Elm Street 3 reunion, which, how appropriate was that announced, right? Between our 2 episodes. Yes. And it is featuring none other than Nancy, Heather Langenkamp, sorry, I muffed her name. Hopefully I'll get it better if I meet her. And right there alone, that's enough to get me to want to go to this show if I wasn't going to. Because, I mean, if there's certain people in the horror industry that, you want to take the chance to meet if they go. And I have not seen her at a Chiller. I mean, I know I missed some for years in there, but I don't know if she's been to one yet or in a while. But I am definitely going to make an attempt to go see her there, because that that's just a great meet there. Jennifer Rubin, who played Taryn, she was like the punk girl. Rodney Eastman, who plays Joey. And of course, Ira Hayden, played Will, which is Tim's favorite. He played that wizardy Dungeons and Dragons kind of guy. So yeah, so that right there alone, that's good. But they also have They have a guy from Friday the 13th. It was Kevin O'Brien. He played Loco. He's one of the 3 punk guys that kind of terrorized the group in part 3. They were actually having a Creepshow 2 reunion.
This is cool.
Yeah. So it's got Mike Gornick, one of the directors. It's got Rich Catazone, Catazzoni. I'm sorry if I butchered his name. He was the animation design, which if you remember, Creepshow 2 had that amazing animated sequence in the beginning and end, the bookends of that, which was really cool. Don Harvey, who played Rich Boy, that was in the first installment with the cigar store Indian kind of guy. He was one of the troubled youths that came in. Daniel Beer, who played Randy from the Raft episode, and Dominic John Sportelli, which played Billy, which was the kid that was ended up becoming animated, I guess, in the bookend sequences there. So yeah, so far that's pretty good, and we still got a lot of time to go before so that guest list just keeps improving, and the fact that they have such big names early is a good sign. So I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to make every effort to get up there for this one, because I think it'll just be super cool for both Brian and I to represent Civil Gore at Chiller this year, but. We'll see how it works out. Depends on if it's in the travel budget this year or not.
Yeah, hopefully you can do it, because then I figured if we go Saturday and then Sunday, maybe we can hit that amazing Lake Compounds haunt, which you need to go to at some point also. But that's for another day.
Yep. So thankfully we have a short dismemberment this week, because we've had some really lengthy ones lately.
And thank God, and our wallets are thankful as well.
Exactly. So the first one is the Blu-ray releases for August 8th. The first one up is called Tenement. It's from 1985, and it's about a drug-selling and violent street gang who terrorized the renters of a big, trashy apartment house. The descriptions, again, on these IMDb things kill me. But so, kind of sounds like one of those gritty, I don't know, violent thug movies.
Yeah, it's not even like, it's weird to even classify it as horror. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what it was classified as, so I threw it on.
Yeah, maybe they have fangs or something.
Yeah. And then Among Us from 2017.
I don't think I heard of this.
This is another one of those couple moves to a new house.
Oh, right, and the death of a child,
Yeah, after the death of their young son, a couple flees to a remote lake house to escape the haunting following them, only to discover the entity is still very much a part of their lives, so... I don't know much about this one. I don't know if it's good or not, but I do want to check it out. I like, it's kind of a tired premise, but I like haunted house movies.
Right, so that's the thing. It's like, those I seem to, like, they're reused, a haunted house, but come on, that's one of the most basic horror premises. And the good thing is they still churning them out with some sort of originality to them, which is good. So.
Yeah. And they're quite scary these days, especially the James Wan stuff. So.
Oh yeah, he's amazing with his stuff.
We have 2 theatrical releases this week, and I'm gonna skip ahead to the limited release, which is called Lichen, and it's about 6 college kids who are assigned a group project to rediscover a moment in history. So they go to the backwoods of Georgia to investigate the legend of Emily Burt, aka the Talbot County Werewolf.
This almost sounds like a kind of a Blair Witch, huh? Just not found footage, though, I bet.
I'm guessing it's a real legend.
Right.
Because otherwise the movie would be kind of boring.
Right. Yeah, because if no one's heard of this thing, it's like, why care about it, I guess.
Yeah, so that one's in limited release. But then we have a big, huge, humongous release this week.
Right.
And
the first of the 2 big Stephen King ones of the year.
Yeah. The Dark Tower. Now, I have real mixed feelings about this movie because I'm a huge Dark Tower fan. Like you guys know, I'm a huge Stephen King fan. I've read all of his books. I have pored over the Dark Tower novels. I have read the Dark Tower comics. I love everything about Roland and the Gunslinger and Jake and all those characters. And when the casting for this movie came about, I will tell you, I was a little iffy.
So don't get me wrong. I love Idris Elba. Love him.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite actors, actually.
He's one of my favorite actors too. So it had nothing to do with race or the actor or anything like that. The reason I was skeptical is because in the books, Roland is described over and over and over. And there's a very clear picture of my mind of what Roland looked like. He's often described as looking kind of like Clint Eastwood, kind of the.
And so he's the gunslinger, I suppose. I'll admit, I don't know I did not read this book. I don't know anything about it. So it's actually, I was thinking it'd be kind of fun for us both to go see this in the theater and give our impersonations. You, someone who's very familiar with it, me, who has no clue about it.
That would be cool because that may be where we differ. But yes, but in the books, he's very descriptive of who Roland is. And the other thing in the books is there's a big racial component because there's an African-American character that plays a major role in the books, which she's not in this movie. Her name is Susanna, but there's a white guy named Eddie, and there's some racial lessons, and I don't know if lessons is the right word, but that's explored through the books, right? So then when you cast the main character as African-American character, then you kind of ask, well, how are they going to do this? Because you've flipped everything on its head.
Right.
Now, from what I understand, the movie is not going to follow the books. The movie is essentially and it's hard to explain this without spoiling any of the books, but it basically takes place in the same world with the same characters, but doesn't necessarily follow the same time.
Oh, okay. So it's almost like a reimagining or another view of it, I guess?
Yeah. If you had read the books, you'd kind of know where I'm going with this, but I won't give anything away. And that's fine. I'm okay with that, and that's why I'm going to give it a chance. Now, I will say the trailer didn't do anything for me. It looked very... almost... It looked Hollywoodized to me.
I remember seeing a trailer. I just watched it because of, I know it's a big movie, but I didn't know it. To me, like, I didn't know anything of it, so I didn't have any really reaction to it. But it seems like they're not promoting it the way they are It, which is still a couple of months off. Like 2 months off. Yeah. But I think just maybe, I don't know, do you think maybe they know that it could have a mixed reaction, so they're really kind of downplaying it?
I don't know, and it's weird because you're definitely probably not going to satisfy hardcore Dark Tower fans because they've changed so much. But then again, how do you market this to people who have never read the books? Because it's a crazy story, It almost sounds
like a marketing nightmare, in all honesty.
Yeah, it's not a known IP you can go after. I mean, Stephen King, okay, you've got the name recognition there, but people don't know who these characters are. It's not really horror, per se. It's got some horrific elements, but it's part Western, it's part sci-fi, it's part fantasy. And so how do you market that? People see Stephen King, they think it's going to be scary. But it's not. So... I don't know.
Think about it. He did Stand By Me too, and so that's not, he did that story. So
it's going to be interesting. I'm definitely going to go see it opening night. I will be there, so we'll have impressions for you soon enough, I guess.
Yeah, I'll try to work on my Idris Elba impression. If you mean impressions that way? I see. Yeah. That was bad. Yeah. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, I'm no, but so let me ask you a quick question on this though. So. It was how many books made up the series? So I think Julie has them all. I believe she has them all. But
so there's 7 main entries to the series.
Oh, wow.
And then he went back and did what they call 4.5. He wrote a book that takes place between books 4 and 5, which is also, I guess, technically part of the series. But it's kind of a backfill.
So this movie cannot be covering all 7 books, obviously. Right?
No, not at all. It's basically going to be the same characters and probably some element of the plot, some fraction of the plot. It almost be like let's say we were trying to adapt the entire Star Wars saga from episode 1 on into one movie.
Oh, okay.
You might have.
I think some people may like that, knocking off the prequels into one movie.
Yeah, well, you might have Luke and Darth Vader, and they're just doing battle or something. You know, it's a very condensed version.
Oh, okay.
Is what I'm assuming. I don't know. It's gonna be strange.
Yeah, because I know it. You know, obviously it has two like major segments, and I know this movie that's coming out is just the first part, and then the second one, next movie, I think is gonna be the second part. So I didn't know if that's the way they were going with it. Like this was gonna be the first of a bunch of series, but it seems like from what you said, it seems like it's a one-off.
Well, originally they were gonna do a TV series and feature films together to tell the complete story.
Oh, that's interesting. It's an expanded universe.
This has been in production hell for years and years and years. I've been following this.
It's never a good sign though when it takes that long.
And I almost kind of feel like they finally just decided this is their one way to get something out there. So I don't know. I don't know if the plan is, if this is successful, they'll continue. Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, it's funny. I could see like someone like me going into it, if it's a really good movie, enjoying it more than people that really love the series, just because, you know, they have this mindset of what it should be like. And
yeah, it's very likely. In fact, I think I hate to prejudge a movie before I go in, but I can't help it being such a fan. Like, I'm really cynical about this one. I'm going to try to not look at any reviews and just go in fresh minded and try not to let my opinions get the better of me before I watch it, but we'll see how it goes. But speaking of it, Brian, did you see they released the running time today?
Oh no, I didn't.
2 hours and 15 minutes.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Which means it is longer than either of the two halves of the miniseries. That's
going to be good. That means that they're really going to go into the. I know I haven't read the book yet. I have it. I'm trying. My plan was to finish it before I really haven't started it yet, and I know I'm running out of time. So I'm gonna have to do, and that is a monster of a book. But I figure if I can get through half of it, it might be enough. But I understand. I know there's a lot. They already said there's just no way they're gonna be able to show on film. I guess I don't know what that means, but. I don't know. They just said it's so like in detailed that it's like impossible, I guess, to completely show things.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. It's easily one of my favorite of his
right,
novels.
But like they said, it's like even like that's what the miniseries. I mean, it was on TV, but I get even that it was long as it was. Just there's so much, I guess, in the book that they can't show it or something. I read somewhere. I don't know. I didn't read too much because I didn't want it to spoil something for the new movie or the book. So I was like,
I really need to reread it. In fact, I had at one time had thought about taking part in the there's a couple of different Stephen King reread projects where people are going back and reading a lot of his novels.
That's the next thing. Of course, you need one more project.
Yeah, like I need one. But the problem is I've kept up with his books as they're published, so it wouldn't really make any sense for me to reread a lot of the recent, like some of the ones released in the last 10 years or so.
Right.
I don't think I would have any interest in rereading, but I really would like to go back and reread some of my favorites like It and Cujo and Tommy Knockers and some of those like that. When I read those originally, I was in my teens. So you've had a lot of adult life experience since I've read those books, and I'd be interested to see how my opinions change on them.
Right? Yeah, that would be interesting. I mean, that's like a whole thing. I mean, I think we'll have to at some point just maybe do a similar kind of episode like this where we maybe hit a couple of like obviously there's certain Stephen King adaptions that regardless need its own episode fully, like The Shining or something like that. But but I mean, maybe like we could do a couple, like a little mini retrospect where we do like, let's say The Shining and then a handful of the other ones, because there's some that it could probably easily can do in an episode, an episode do 3 or 4, do something similar to this style,
Yep, that would be fun.
Especially if the Summer Slaycation series works out good. I mean, there's still. I know we're not gonna go through all of them this summer, so it could be a yearly thing where we just keep doing it.
And this series has been very popular so far, download wise. So, yep.
Thank you, people, for listening.
But let's get right into it because it's Nightmare on Elm Street time, and it's Freddy's Revenge, 1985. Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And this one kind of started the subtitle craze of all the sequels. This one was directed by Jack Shoulder, written by David Chaskin. Now, a lot of these had multiple writers on them,
Right?
obviously, but I'm just listing like the most prominent. It was written by David Chaskin, starring Mark Patton, who I saw at Mad Monster.
Oh, he was there?
Yep, he was there.
Okay.
Kim Myers, and this one was basically Wes Craven. You know, obviously got credit for the characters, but he had no involvement in the writing and direction, and it really, really shows.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm probably, I'm going. Like I said, I'm watching that documentary. Never Sleep Again. I'm wondering if it'll go through this kind of a thing, but I assume, because remember how we talked about in the first part of this, the Freddy talk, where Wes Craven wanted a certain ending, Bob Shea wanted another ending, and they compromised and got that little ambiguous ending. So I'm wondering if maybe, like, because I based on the way Wes Craven wanted that to end, I wonder if that's all he wanted. So, the prospect of a sequel, he just probably wasn't down for at the time.
Right. Well, watching this one, I had not seen this one in forever, because I usually go back and watch Dream Warriors or something like that.
Right. That's like that.
It's been a long time since I'd seen part 2. And it starts out okay. It's got a cool sequence where Freddy's driving a school bus. And in fact, in my mind, I had sometimes I get that. And so for some reason, that school bus has always stuck in my mind. And sometimes I get it mixed up with the ending of part 1. They just kind of blend together.
Well, it's similar. They go into school.
Yeah.
It actually is. If you think about it, that kind of blends in perfectly on how it should kind of progress from part 1 to part 2. That's kind of where it ends to me.
Yeah, I think because when I first watched these, I watched them back to back, so it almost was like one continuous.
Oh, right, yeah, so that makes sense.
This movie when I was first exposed to them. So the plot line around this one is Freddy ends up entering the real world through Jesse, a character named Jesse, which I can understand that they had to go somewhere a little different for the sequel, but it kind of takes away the dynamic of the first one, where the kids were trying to stay awake versus dreaming,
right?
That kind of thing. So it kind of turns that on its head a little bit, which may be to its detriment rather than a good thing.
Yeah, and it kind of, to me, it had like it almost like they jumped the shark a little bit, so soon to like change I don't know, but I don't know if you could call it mythology yet, because it really wasn't a full mythology developed under the basic stuff. And now don't get me wrong, it makes sense for Freddy to come back and go after someone else. Because if you remember, Nancy did not kill Freddy. She just kind of took his power away from him, essentially. And he kind of like, because she's like, no, I'm not afraid of you. I don't believe in you anymore. That's the end. So he couldn't get to her psychologically anymore. He couldn't get to her in her dreams. He couldn't get to her in the real world. She basically neutralized him. So it makes sense that he could, as long as he found another outlet to get to somebody, it would make sense for him to come back. But
yep,
yeah, I agree with you though. Why the fact that he, I don't think I like that they took away the whole trying to stay awake thing. I mean, they kind of had a thing, but it basically was like this whole kid sweating the whole time because his house was too hot.
Yeah.
It was very grueling of a movie to watch.
It'd almost be if you took a Jason movie and said, it's not going to be summer camp anymore. Yeah. We're just going to send him on a cruise ship to Manhattan.
Yeah. The good thing they didn't do that one. Yeah.
But anyway.
Or send him into space, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, this movie, and I'll put it in the rundown, suffers from 1985 syndrome. It is so unabashedly 80s.
Yeah.
And it is so dated. Now, one of the things I loved, and I think I even pointed it out last episode, was when you go back and watch Nightmare on Elm Street, it holds up really well.
Right. It does.
It has kind of a timeless quality to it, even though it was 84. It was only a year earlier. But the kids aren't like, hey, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like that. They're not dressed like completely 80s. It's just a, like I said, a timeless quality.
And let's be honest. I mean, nothing against, Mark Patton and Kim Myers, but the cast wasn't as good. It was nowhere near as good. The
No.
first cast was a magical cast. They got everybody perfect. And it was just, that's the way it was. I mean, you had great parents for Nancy. I mean, the parents in this one were just, to me, they were just excruciating.
Central casting, generic dad and mom.
Yeah. It just...
It was bad. But, there was this scene, I put it in the rundown, where Jesse is in his room dancing with those blind shade glasses. You know what I'm talking about? The vertical blind, I don't know what you call them. Dancing to those to, bad 80s music. It's almost like they said, we want to make sure people know damn well this was filmed in 1985.
Right. Regardless of when we want this, that if this film gets buried in a time capsule, you'll know when it comes out.
Because we're going to put everything from the 80s in this one scene.
Yeah.
I almost expected Alf to come marching.
I think I saw him in the
Rubik's
corner,
Cube.
actually. I think you're right.
Yeah, doing a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And then Max
it's
Headroom
really
or something.
bad.
Yeah, it's like... what else, It's like, geez.
Freddie. I don't know.
Really, that was
Max.
the only thing was missing at that point. Yeah, no, it was just a rough... I don't know about you. I just had a rough time. And I used to watch this thing all the time because it used to be like an HBO staple at one point.
Yeah.
And just this time watching it, I'm just like... and it seemed so gritty and just sludging along.
It's very boring, actually.
Yeah, it is.
It's slow paced.
Yeah.
But this is the thing I really wanted to talk about because it's so weird. And I noticed it without even knowing anything about that this is a thing. And that is, and there's not that there's anything wrong with that, to quote Seinfeld. But anyway, there's this weird homoeroticism to this movie that I don't know why or where it comes from. But the first time I noticed it was there was a lot of shirtless guy shots.
Right.
And I always...
Which is the opposite of most horror films. I mean,
so I always kind of raise an eyebrow. But then there is a scene where this guy actually gets killed from a towel snapping on his naked ass.
Yeah, and
that is one of the death scenes.
Yeah, and wasn't he he was into all those he even said it. He goes, he gets off on watching all the guys run around.
Yeah, it was so... I was like, what? I did not remember this at all.
See, when I saw it, I was a kid, so I definitely did not pick up on in terms of any movie, any undertones of any movie. I saw a movie and I saw it for what it was. I didn't know. I was... So let's see. It was 85. I was 13 years old. To me, I was still watching movies for just the fun of movies. I didn't analyze anything.
Yeah.
So now when I watch it, and I had heard this, this brought up many a times in reviews and everything. So I kind of went in there knowing that was in there, and it was. You're right. It was weird. It's so obvious.
And there's one shot where there's literally a guy stands up in close to the camera, and it basically just focuses on his underwear, like a crotch shot of his underwear, while the other character's talking to him in the background, which was just a weird choice. Yeah. I was like, why are you showing this guy's crotch?
And there's even a line I think that Grady says, it calls it out, where he says he goes, it's when he ran from the party after he was making out with his girlfriend, and he runs over to Grady, and Grady's like, then what the hell are you doing with me? It's like,
yeah.
I mean, they flat out call it out. So there was some sort of intention by it. So whatever the reason, like you said, I don't know why. Yeah. Whatever it is, that's fine. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I'm not passing judgment on it. I'm just saying it's weird.
Yeah, but the thing is, it doesn't actually, it's not the cause, or it doesn't add anything to why this movie is still one of the least favorites of mine out of this whole series. It's just I love just looking at the Freddy element. I don't like the Freddy character in it, even though he has one of the most famous lines in it. You've got the body, I've got the brain. But the thing is, it's still I don't like the way they had Fred. I don't like how he was trying to come through him into the real world. Like you said, it took away that whole element that made the first one so great.
Yeah, and when I say it's weird, I'm saying homo.
No, I know exactly. Yeah,
eroticism is weird. I'm saying it's weird that they chose this movie to like to portray that.
Right.
It's kind of an odd choice of this movie in particular. So
right.
Very interesting. Though.
But and you did put in the notes. There are some. The thing is, it's not a movie with nothing redeeming.
No,
in it.
not at all.
There is,
there's far worse sequels, as we will see.
Right. I mean, and Freddy starting to talk, well, a little bit. It's good, and he's got his, the line, and like you put here on the rundown, and this freaked me out when I was a kid with the dog with the human faces on it.
Yeah, it's like dogs with human masks on.
Yeah, that was creepy as hell.
Yeah. I had Freddy when he comes out of Jesse's body. That was pretty well done.
Yeah, right. It was like that was the thing. It was like it was definitely by far it was not one of the films that has like no redeeming qualities, no merit to it. It carried, I guess, the series enough to the next one. Although you could see that with the next one as we get into it, that they definitely tried to not make the same mistake and kind of go back to the mythology, the original mythology of Freddy, and expand on it that way.
Let's because you're gonna see this running character arc of Freddy through all these movies. Right. So if you remember in the first film, he doesn't say a whole lot, but he's very sinister. Right. In part 2, you get the first tiny glimpse of his jokester persona. Right. With some of his lines, but he's still pretty menacing. He's not the cartoon character he will become later on by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, he's still mysterious enough, even with a couple of his lines, that he's still scary.
Right. So that brings us to what I consider and what most people, I believe, consider is the second best film in the series.
I agree.
Which is A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Yeah. This one came out in 1987, so they had an extra year in there to produce it. It was directed by Chuck Russell, but it was co-written by Wes Craven.
And you can
Bruce
tell.
Wagner. You can tell. And I strongly believe, like we've said many, many times before in this podcast, a great cast can overcome mediocre material and make something really good.
Right.
A great cast can do wonders. And not that I'm saying this is mediocre material by any means, but just saying that this cast is just stellar. You've got Heather Langenkamp returns, which is awesome. Right. You've got Lawrence or Larry
he goes
Fishburne,
in there, yeah.
when he was still going by Larry, and then Patricia Arquette. And that's just the big name.
Right. I mean, you got Craig Wasson in there, which is he's been in. I think he was in Ghost Story, so he's got some good horror cred in there. The kids are while they're not known, they're a great bunch of great casting. You like the group of kids that are in there. So, and I think the nurse was someone pretty right. I mean, she was the one that played that mean kind of nurse. Mm-hmm. She's been in stuff.
Yeah, some recognizable faces, especially if you're a horror fan. Going back and looking at this at the time, I didn't recognize any of these people, right. But going back, obviously they're very recognizable. And this is the first time Freddy really starts cracking one-liners, with probably one of his most famous quotes, which is "Welcome to prime time, bitch."
Right. Yeah, and it's funny, that line kind of almost echoes the way that film was received. It almost put Freddy really into the pop culture, because I think that was that the one where Will Smith had his song, or was that the next one?
I'm not sure,
but
1987 is about the right time frame, though,
right?
probably.
But I just remember the promotion of this one was pretty stellar. Like it was definitely, Freddy was was becoming like this pop culture phenomenon at this point, where he was, I remember the movie was promoted heavily. I think they had some books and magazines, and so I know my friend and I we used to watch this all the time, because it was so great, because it was the first time, I think, where the whole cast of kids all had really cool, personalities and dynamics. Like the first one, with Nancy, you had Nancy was kind of cool, and the other people were kind of just supporters in it all. But this one, it seemed like they all had their own kind of a thing. So, it was like, yes, Patricia Arquette played the main character. and it all stemmed from her. But it was like everyone was a contributor to how good this movie was, and all the characters were, in it.
Right. I like the idea that they actually had people fighting back. Like, you felt like they really had a chance against Freddy. It just wasn't just some person just trying to survive against him. They were actually going to battle with him, basically.
Right. And it was cool how, they were kind of led by, by Nancy, the one true survivor. Because, technically in part 2, Jesse, you want to say survived and but, it just seemed like it was more, I think, the girlfriend that kind of was really the helpful. It's like, I don't know.
Right. This one was more of a true sequel to the original than 2 was.
Like, I hate to say it, they could have almost easily just removed 2, and you could go from 1 to 3.
Yeah, you really could.
Granted, you Freddy, then all of a sudden he's like talking and his character would have jumped a little more, but I think it would have still worked. Maybe in like maybe do like how Star Wars does their machete order. Maybe people should watch it, try and go 1. They go watch 1, 3, 4, 5, and skip 6, and then
yeah, we'll have to come up with that.
We'll call it the claw order though, because machete doesn't make sense for this one. But
well, this one has probably some of the best kills in the whole series, I would argue. One of my absolute favorites, and one that immediately came to mind when I was thinking about my favorite kills of the entire franchise, was the human marionette kill, where he like basically rips the guy's veins out and uses him as a puppet to march him out of the window.
Right. And
that freaked me out as a kid.
And if you think about it, this was in this movie was the first one where Freddy was beyond just him manipulating his body, almost, so to speak. Like, like in the first one, he had the longer arms. He was cutting his own, body off. He's, pulling his skull back, seeing his brain. But this was the one where he would like appear in truly different forms, like where he was like literally sitting there as like a big giant Freddy over the building, and like, and or when he was this, like you put the Snake Freddy. Or he became a TV, he really became other things, and he really was pushing the elements, like he was going beyond just Freddy Krueger, the man-shaped version of it.
Right, which was cool, because they probably had a bigger budget to work with, and so they could really explore all those dream elements, where, he really is a master of dreams, where he can manipulate himself and do crazy stuff like that.
Right.
So that was really cool.
Yeah, and this film it felt like it had a bigger budget. It felt like it was bigger, and it was like Wes Craven's coming back. Let's give him what he wants to make what he wants, and so that like you could tell, like watching this movie, how the parts that like were just true Wes Craven, as opposed to the other one. So
yeah, and I had it on here that I thought that you could probably make the argument that Freddy's Part 3 was just as important as Jason's Part 3 in terms of establishing the character. Because in Friday the 13th Part 3, of course, that's when he gets his mask, his hockey mask. That's really where modern Jason as we know him, began.
Right.
And I feel like Part 3 is really where the mainstream version of Freddy as we know him really began, in terms of he starts doing more of the one-liners and stuff, but it's not over the top.
No.
He's still scary.
Right.
But you could see more of that personality, that joking personality. And it also establishes the whole Dream Warrior concept that will run through the rest of the series. I mean, you could argue that Nancy, she was a warrior. She fought back. And Jesse, but this one was where you really get the first idea that there's people that can actually have a power equal and opposite to Freddy to actually fight.
Right.
Him.
And what's funny is that sometimes too, it's like at first it almost like it could be used as poorly, like you bring someone into your dream that you don't necessarily want to bring in there to deal with it, but because think about it, these people, they almost got, granted, it was very quick. It was kind of like Luke's Jedi training, It's like one session, and all of a sudden, okay, they need to know how, now they know how to manipulate their dreams, kind of thing. But you know what? You forgive it. It's a movie. You're not going to sit there through 18 training sessions in a room. So they did what they did. It was perfect. But, so it was kind of interesting, because you kind of just can't bring someone into Dreamy. You see in the later episodes when they bring in, we'll get to it, where they bring in people that like don't necessarily want to be in there at that moment.
Well, I mean, it just goes to show you Wes Craven's writing.
Right.
Part 2, like we said, drags and drags and drags. This movie never drags because he's a good writer. He understands that you have to keep the pace and not dwell on stuff like you said, 18 months of training.
Right.
For the sake of the movie and the entertainment of the audience, you just keep things moving right along, and we'll forgive you as the audience because we appreciate you not putting us to sleep.
Right. Especially in this movie.
Yeah.
You don't want to fall asleep through the Nightmare on Elm Street.
No pun intended.
No, yeah. But yeah, and this is one where I don't want it to ever end. You have so much fun with this, with this cast and with this movie and with the elements that they give Freddy, and like you said, it establishes one-liner thing, but they didn't do it over the top. He he kind of did it as per kill. It's like the welcome to prime time, bitch. That was the kill. Or as you get on later, he almost had a tagline with every one of his kills in it. But it was established in a good way in this one to where you realize that you kind of accept it as not being cheesy, regardless of how cheesy it really may be if you take a step back from it. But it works.
I thought it was a good balance,
right.
Though. They were one-liners, but the kills were so cool that it kind of balanced out the cheesiness, whereas that was not always be the case as we move along.
Right, yeah. They definitely get a little different than this one, but yeah, and like you said too, this also, it sheds a little bit on Freddy's backstory, to kind of, but not in a way to where it's not one of these monotonous backstory drag on moments. They kind of do it intermittently. And you don't want to forget, you do get the return of another beloved character in the series, which is John Saxon's character, and it's kind of sad to see that he hasn't fared well since the first movie. He's not a cop anymore, which is funny. No. I didn't notice it all the times when I saw it back in the day. I never caught that the patch on his jacket is basically says security now. It's not a police jacket. It looks very much like one, but you realize that, he's basically become a drunk. He obviously must have lost his job in there. He's just the strain was a lot on him. And it seems like obviously his relationship with Nancy was strained. And it's great because they get all that with not a lot of exposition to it. They just, it's implied enough in just a couple of the scenes, and it works out. So it makes it work well. It just moves on, but you get it. You get all that you need to get in quick time.
Well, they did not waste any time with the follow-up, which was a year later, 1988, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Right. It was directed by Rennie Harlan and written by William Kotzwinkle.
Kotzwinkle. That's like, it reminds me of Seinfeld. Kitzmiller. Remember that?
So you have Ken... I don't want to ruin these names, sorry. Nightmare
Sagos,
fans, but Ken Sagos returns as Kincaid and Rodney Eastman returns as Joey. So you do, which is good. At least they have a tie to Dream Warriors, which I liked. But the lead characters are just not as likable this time around. It introduces a major character in the series.
But I love Alice. I know the character, the group as a whole isn't as good, but Alice I loved. It was one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
Plus I had a crush on Lisa Wilcox. So.
Yeah, Alice is awesome. Alice Johnson would become a major character in the series because she's in both 4 and 5. Right. And she's also the Dream Master, referenced in the title. But
she's almost like the Tommy Jarvis to me of this
yeah,
series.
She really is. And what's cool is like she would go on to appear in the Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash comic series.
I gotta pick that up. I gotta look for an old version of that or something on eBay or something.
I've read those comics. They're really cool. If you want to, it's kind of fun to see how. I love when comics explore continuations of movies because you'll never get that movie, right? But at least for the comic, you get some kind of closure to the story and stuff. I thought that was really cool. Well, that she was featured in that.
Yeah, and I don't want to jump ahead too much because we don't really get into Alice quite yet. But it's funny you said it because I remember when Freddy vs. Jason was first announced, and there was a whole bunch of like fake scripts going out there. I remember there was one I got a hold of that was swearing it was real, even though I just knew it was too good to be true. It literally featured Nancy, Tommy Jarvis, and Alice Johnson all in it, like getting together.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
right.
there is no way, first of all, they're going to get all these. Because at that point, I didn't think they were ever going to get Heather Langenkamp back. I assumed she moved on from the series, which was fine because, she was essentially killed in the third one. So, but not, as we know in horror movies, no one is ever truly dead.
Right.
They could always find a way to bring her back. So I really, I just liked, okay, how are they pulling this off? How are they? So I knew it kind of was real, but it just shows what, proves my point about how she was like the Tommy Jarvis of the series at some level. She became almost as, to some level, and no disrespect to Heather Langenkamp, of course, but she almost became as important as her in the series.
Yeah, she became Freddy's new nemesis with the absence of Nancy,
Right.
Which was kind of cool. Now, this one ups the ante when it comes to Freddy one-liners.
Oh, yeah.
He definitely starts getting a little more cheesy this time. There's a sequence in the classroom where it says, "Learning is fun with Freddy."
Yeah.
It's got like slogans written down. There's the really bad GIF that I posted on Twitter where Freddy's wearing sunglasses.
Oh yeah,
that I just cringed.
And the jaws with his claw going through the sand. And that's the one with the "got your nose," right? That was this one.
Yeah.
There's a ton in here, and it's like, yeah, you're right. The characters weren't as likable. They weren't dislikable. They were not. You didn't dislike them.
No. But it just wasn't. It's hard to follow up part 3.
Right.
Let's face it. It was going to be hard no matter what. And this one, it's fine for what it is. It's not terrible.
No, it's definitely not
by any means. Because, like I said, Alice Johnson is such a good character. And we should also note that Patricia Arquette was replaced with Tuesday Night.
Right, and she would, and so it's funny because like Patricia Arquette at that point, I assume started to get bigger. She just didn't want to get typecast in horror or something.
Right.
I guess she just didn't come back. And Tuesday Night, nothing against her. She's just not. She was not Patricia Arquette. She just had this and the stark differences between the two Kristen characters. It was. I don't. There was this Patricia Arquette had this cute mousiness to her, and this little vulnerability that Tuesday Night had just almost this cockiness about her. This grittiness, and it just didn't play as well to me.
I guess you could argue that after her experiences in 3, maybe she's a little more cocky and experienced, but
just darker in it.
Honestly, when I first watched this, I didn't even pick up the fact that they were supposed to be the same character.
Until you saw Kincaid and Joey back, right?
Right. Yeah, it took me like a minute or two to, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I first saw this. So I'll at least commend them for tying it back to 3.
Right.
And instead of just going off in some crazy, insane direction, they really did try to continue the story in kind of a logical manner, where with this new character Alice, which really sets the franchise up for more adventures to come, because they know they can keep her as, like you said, as the Tommy Jarvis of the series. Again, it shows kind of the parallels with Friday the 13th, which were kind of happening along the same time.
They did in an interesting way too, how they established Alice's character. They kind of, she was this like quiet, very she was just like this loner, so to speak. But they kind of like, they had her around. He was Kristen's boyfriend's little sister, but she kind of, they kept her around basically. But then somehow Kristen brought her into the dream, and in that one sequence, it's very confusing. It's funny if you don't catch it right, you could miss a very important element that. When Kristen is getting sucked into the boiler, I guess, she throws her power out, basically, to Alice, but it hits Freddy, so she gets, like, both. Like, some of Freddy's capabilities, if you notice, and some of Kristen's abilities. And I don't think I've caught that in many of the times I've watched this movie. I've heard a review about someone saying, like it was some other podcast. I think I did a review of it once, and they kind of said something about it. And I really noticed it this time. It like the effect of it, I guess, of this light that shoots out, kind of hits Freddy, and he goes and it bounces off into Alice, and she gets like hit with some of both. So I think that's why she has that weird connection with Freddy too in it. So it's very unique how they kind of establish Alice pretty quickly, and remember how she was basically the biggest way is how every time one of her friends was killed, she'd adapt their ability as Freddy was taking their soul, kind of a thing. So it's actually it gets to a little bit of a complicated nature, which is kind of unique for the Elm Street at this point to kind of go there. But I loved it. It's like I loved how they started, and you kind of grew with Alice throughout that movie.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that these movies were a little bit more complex than your average slasher of the time.
Right, yeah, and that's what made it. Yeah, I think that's what made it stand out from the other ones a lot. And and that's why you could really I think it just helped that the villain too, out of all, I mean, if you think of every horror villainous icon, none of them really say anything. That's true. This is the first one that truly has a personality that can interact with the other characters, so it adds that dimension right off the bat. I mean, obviously some of the other ones do it, but like Michael Myers, and says a word. Jason, obviously,
Leatherface.
None of these people they don't say anything. So that adds a dynamic on its own. So that's why I think it's important to have such a good cast opposite Freddy, as well as having him be so good. I think that's what's important. I think that's why part 2 failed, because none of the characters are really likable against him.
Well, it's also important to note that in every other series that I can think of, the main villain was played by numerous actors over the course of the franchise.
That's true, right?
Except for this one. This was always Robert Englund's Freddy. I mean, so yeah, interesting point. That brings us to 1989, A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Child, also known as Part 5, I guess.
Yeah.
And this one was directed by Stephen Hopkins, written by John Skip, and starring Lisa Wilcox and Kelly Jo Minter.
I don't know why I laughed at the John Skip. The writers on this are great. William Kotzwinkle, John Skip.
Well, Alice Johnson returns. This time she's blonde.
Yes.
Which threw me for a
naked
loop at first.
In the beginning, which is
sorry.
Listen, when I was out, come on, I was a young single guy when this was out.
Brian can sense nudity in movies.
Yes, I can.
He's told us on numerous occasions.
I can. I loved the opening to this film.
Yeah. So this one was kind of an interesting premise. I don't know if they totally pulled it off, but Freddy's continuously trying to get into the real world, and in this one, he wants to be reborn as Alice's unborn child.
Right.
And that's going to be his way into the real world. This one had Whit Hertford, who you've seen before. He's a recognizable child star that played Jacob.
Yeah. He was in Jurassic Park.
I noticed... Oh, yeah. I noticed that he was... I recognized him from Full House.
Oh,
he was the little annoying neighbor kid named Walter. And I went and looked at his IMDb. So he did a lot of 80s television, and then he went on to do a whole lot of voice work for cartoons, which I thought was kind of cool.
Oh, that's interesting.
So he had a really good career after this, doing a lot of voice work stuff. So, but yeah, this one not as good as 4. It's got a lot of really bad effects. They use that. You've seen the music video for "Take on Me."
Oh yeah, that guy, the animated guy.
Where they turn into drawings. It's like they just and maybe they had. Maybe this is about the time that came out, because they were using that like it was going out of style, which it did. But they were just using that effect right and left. It was sort of like when The Matrix came out, and everybody did the 360 slow motion thing forever. Like, it seems like whenever they come up with some new effect, like every movie's got to use it.
Yeah, why is that? For God's sake.
Yeah, but anyway, some really new lows in this one. Freddy skateboarding, for instance.
Oh my God, yeah,
he's actually on a skateboard. Yeah, he's actually on a skateboard. But one of the things I had here in the rundown was it does have one of the more memorable lines where the guy says, Time to die, you scar-faced limp dick.
Oh yeah, that was the where he became that other character, right?
Yeah, that's what they. Oh man, this was bad. So they go into the comic book world, I guess, the drawing world, and the main character is like I don't know, I guess like some kind of superhero. Then Freddy becomes Super Freddy.
Oh god, that part. Yeah, that reminds me. I'm getting like the flashbacks of Super Shredder from Ninja Turtles too.
That's what he looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got like a big, thick meat head, and he's like, it was really bad. It was so bad.
Yeah.
And then like there was some weird stuff with the baby being born, like baby Freddy, and there's like a baby Freddy.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
I did like the way they had, they kind of relived though how, like, it was Freddy was the way he wanted to be reborn was kind of making, actually being reborn his way, where, and Alice kind of when he had that opening sequence was really cool opening sequence because it was a way of establishing what he was trying to do without really getting into too much exposition. That was what Nightmare on Elm Street was, I think, pretty good at. Through most of it, they got you the information you needed without really going through a whole diatribe of some sort,
Right, yeah, and the story, if you don't look at the movie itself, if you're just reading it on paper, like the story concepts are kind of really cool. The way they come up with different ways of Freddy trying to get into the real world and stuff. I like the whole mythology. Why Freddy needs to be on a skateboard while we're exploring this mythology, I don't know, but.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you got to remember though, at that point, it was Nightmare on Elm Street was becoming, Freddy was becoming think about it. It's a guy that essentially was a child murderer, and he became
and molester.
Well, that if you remember though, that they cut out. That really wasn't. That was the original script. When he actually became into the movies, they dropped that. It was just a murderer. But that's what when we get into the remake. They kind of go back to that original story, which is probably why you couldn't make him goof around as much either, because it would really, how could you? And so think about it, like people were rooting for Freddy, like they root for Jason, but at some level it's like Jason, there's also the sympathetic part of Jason, like he didn't, his fate was kind of chosen for him. Freddy was an asshole,
Yeah, there's really nothing sympathetic about him.
Not at all. And yet people loved him because of Robert Englund's portrayal of him. And so you love that character. So they were kind of, instead of at that point, as much as I liked 4 and 5, really what it became is the Freddy show. I mean, while they established the storyline, they moved the storyline forward, but I think it was still took second place to let's get Freddy.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of that period in The Simpsons where Bart Simpson became so popular, and then The Simpsons became the Bart show,
right,
basically.
Exactly.
And it was him saying catchphrases and stuff. And it took a while for them to get past that.
Right, that's a good analogy. Yeah, and well, they obviously did, because what is that show going on? 24 years already? That's crazy.
Yeah.
But,
exactly.
Yeah, so that was the thing. I think that was the problem. He became too popular at some level for his own good, and think about it. New Line Cinema's looking. All right, listen, people are gonna come see Freddy do whatever he does. It kind of unfortunately lost its way as being scary at that point, and became let's see how ingenious ways Freddy can kill somebody now. And
crack a joke at the same time.
I mean, great. And listen, we ate it all up. I loved them. I watched. We all loved it. But it never had gone. Unfortunately, the series never had that same fright that it did in 1 and in somewhat 3.
Yeah.
But
now that brings us to the dreaded.
Ugh.
Part 6, which is Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. This is where, and I'm showing my age here, this is where Freddy became the Spuds McKenzie of horror movies.
Yeah.
Oh, if you don't remember, that was the stupid dog that sold Bud Light, I think.
Yeah, that's what it was.
It was the epitome, like, I don't know what it was about the 80s. There were always all these, like, where's the beef lady?
I'm surprised Freddy never said that line. Now that you said that,
I know.
That's like the one line they forgot. They must have.
Oh my god!
They probably.
It was so full of like everything was catchphrases.
Yeah.
Back then. Oh my gosh! Yeah, and Freddy was no exception. So, the final nightmare. This one was, and I watched this one, and Brian can tell you because we were discussing it. Like, even my wife came in and was just shaking her head. This movie's bad. I have not seen it in a long time because even when I bought the box set, I just went and watched the 3D part. I didn't watch the rest of the movie. Right,
and I watched it. I watched my old DVD of it so I could see the 3D part. And like I had said last week, it was probably the only part that was worth watching, and I put worth very loosely.
Yeah, I had blocked this movie entirely from my mind. Yeah. So it was directed by Rachel Talalay.
Yeah, now she was early on. She did a lot of work on the earlier movies, correct?
Yeah, written by Rachel Talalay, and I don't like to disparage women directors because there are precious few women directors in the world, and we need more of them. God knows, but man, I wish she had not made this movie.
Yeah, this is not one of hers. And it's funny when you say that. I remember I was excited when I found out she was writing it because my friend Paul at the time, he's obviously the one that did our cool first drop sound effect and everything. And I remember he was saying when he was like, "Oh, Rachel Talalay directed." I remember we went to go see this, and in the theater, I gotta say, it was something fun about seeing a Nightmare on Elm Street movie in the theater. You know, you get I think the crowd kind of carried it by just the fun of all the the laugh at the bad stuff and in it. And so I mean, it's not that I didn't enjoy it in the theater, but I know just in subsequent viewings of it, every time I see it, I'm like, why did I like this at all? Like, what redeeming quality did I see in this at all? I'm like...
Well, this is the... as I posted in the rundown, this is the only R-rated movie I've ever snuck into. Believe it or not. It came out literally 2 months from me turning 17. And at the time, the theater this was showing in was extremely strict about checking IDs. Like, there was no way I could have gotten into this movie.
They probably figured your biggest punishment was to see it.
Yeah, so I ended up buying a ticket for some other movie, and I actually went back and tried to figure out which movie I bought a ticket for because I was looking up movies released at the same time, but I can't tell. But I ended up buying a ticket for another movie, and then kind of just did the old switcheroo. But that's the only one, and God bless, that's it. Why that's the one that I did my big break of sneaking into an R-rated film for. I don't know, because it was not worth it.
Well, let me tell you too, just to go back a little bit to Rachel Talalay. I was looking at her. So she was the line producer on Dream Warriors. So she kind of grew up through the series a little bit. And in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, she was one of the producers. Doesn't look like she did anything on 5. But then she obviously, she did Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, as we said. She also directed Ghost in the Machine. And Tank Girl, which Tank Girl I loved. So this is obviously not her best representation. But she's obviously a skilled director.
She got out of the movie game because she ended up going into
right,
TV.
I'm looking. She has about 50 TV credits here, it looks like.
Yeah.
And some big name shows she did here, so including a Supergirl. And so we're not, but yes, Tim and I, let's make that clear. We're not disparaging her as a director or a writer. We're disparaging her for this.
Yeah, exactly. So this one opens up to now the opening is kind of cool because it opens up with a guy in a plane, and it's kind of reminiscent of the old speaking of Twilight Zone, the old Nightmare at 20,000 Feet episode where you have a fear-stricken passenger looking out.
They even had the exact shot of literally him walking out and then the camera going right out the window onto the wing of the plane.
They had to have been evoking that. It could have been coincidental. Yeah, But you get into this Freddy and a Wicked Witch of the West costume, like Wizard of Oz, which, okay, I can maybe kind of be okay with that. Cause,
think about it, at the time, that was what Freddy was doing. It actually made sense. It's just, I think we're growing tired of it at this point, after seeing the whole series too,
Yeah. But it just goes downhill from there. I had some random notes in the rundown, so I'll kind of go through them, but Breckin Meyer is in this one. Who I love him.
Right.
He's good, and he this is might be where he got first typecast as the stoner guy, but he's playing a Ninja Gaiden handheld, which I
think I had that too, or my brother had it. Because it seemed like everybody got that. Like I think it was almost like it came with something. Maybe.
Yeah, you can still get them cheap on eBay, so they must be plentiful.
Yeah, they must have way overproduced it. I wonder if that sold because of this movie.
Yeah, possibly. Well, the first thing I noticed in this movie is the editing was really bad. And I'm not typically that much of a film snob that I really notice editing, but I just noticed some scenes like ended too quickly, and some scenes like the direction was wrong.
Yeah.
Where I couldn't place where the characters were moving from scene to scene. And so that was just one note I had made on here.
Yeah, it was just the whole movie itself was weird. Now, the one thing I will say, I kind of liked the fact that it had this, because it almost had the premise with the Jason Goes to Hell thing, how it was like, okay, this now, Freddy has now just not been in this little bubble at some level. He's kind of, basically, they say that the town of Springfield, the whole town now is just destroyed by him. I kind of like that element.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool
I
premise,
just don't think they did it right. Like the premise itself on paper sounds really cool, but they didn't do it right. It just didn't work somehow. I don't know why it didn't work, or what and I'm not going to claim I could know what they could have done better to make it work, but it just, I don't know. And I think what I don't think any of the characters, even Breckin Meyer, who I like in every other single thing he's done, is not likable in this movie at some level.
No. And just as part 2 was painfully 1985, this one is painfully 1991. So early 90s, just from the clothing, the hairstyles, everything. It's just so dated. There's one part that I honestly paused the movie and got up from my chair and walked out of the room. Was when they go to this little town fair for some reason, and which one of the quotes was very Twin Peaks.
Yeah, it is. It does seem like that.
But freaking Roseanne Barr and Tom Arnold show up.
Yeah. Again,
to show you how 90s this thing is. Like, they show up in a cameo, and it was probably the worst cameo since what's her name? Cyndi Lauper in the Goonies, in the Goonies music.
Oh, right. The wrestlers.
Or whatever.
And,
and the wrestlers. And I was like, oh my God. It was just like, oh.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
And the funny thing is, that could have, here's the thing, that sequence would have played so well. Not the Roseanne Barr part, the whole creepy carnival thing where they're just so, the town is so like just oblivious to what's going on, and they're all kind of lost their mind. If the rest of the movie still had that creepy feel that the first one had, but since it was surrounded by all the comedic Freddy, it didn't have the same impact it could have, And it's like that's what frustrates me, because I'm like, oh wow, this would be a really cool thing, It was creepy, but then 2 minutes later you got Freddy. Now I'm playing with power, And it's like, there you go again. God, you're taken right out of the cool creepiness into stupidity, and it's like,
yeah, that video kill, there's a sequence, if you haven't seen it, and God bless you if you've never seen this movie,
skip it,
keep it that way. But he is actually turns Breckin Meyer into a video game character and is playing Nintendo with him, and he's literally bouncing up and down like Mario, hitting his head on the ceiling. And there's one part where he goes, "Don't forget the power glove."
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's
what, we should be thankful that was then, because if this movie came out today and they had that scene they would actually be releasing a Freddy Krueger power glove to go with whatever system you had.
I mean, that was probably dated the minute it came out of his mouth. Don't you think?
Oh yeah, because
there's no way the power glove was that 91? It wasn't.
I don't know. Be honest. You know what? This would be a great interactive thing. Post on our Facebook page when you hear this, if you guys know what the power glove was. I mean, obviously Tim and I know. We've Our age is no
Yeah.
secret. We know what that is. Like, I remember back from the, the robot from the original Nintendo, Bob. Or Rob, sorry, or whatever it was, robotic operating buddy. So I had that Nintendo, so I'm dating myself big time here. So, I was there through the whole history of Nintendo, even through, remember Virtual Boy and all those terrible...
Oh, God,
right?
yeah.
But I want the average listener, if you guys are listening to this, I want if there's a tweet or an email or something, let us know if you even got that reference for the Power Glove. Because it was, I think it was so short-lived anyway, right? What was it like?
Oh, it was. Oh, yeah. It was not a success by any means.
Because I don't think it ever worked. Was the problem?
No.
I
never had one, and I had everything.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know if we had one or any of my friends had one. I know I tried it, and I just ended up getting frustrated because it wasn't working right. We also had that other crazy thing with the pad, the power pad. Everything Nintendo was power this, and it was nothing worked right.
Well, now you've given it away. What it was.
Oh, I did, didn't I? Well, see, it was still, but see if anyone see if anyone remembers it though. If you remember the actual Power Glove,
Let's see if any old people listen to this podcast.
Yeah, well, now we'll get the demographic.
Yeah.
Much better than Lipson can give us, I guess.
Yeah,
but
Johnny Depp has a cameo in this, kind of,
yeah. Which what? Let's be honest. That at the point they were advertising this as the final Nightmare on Elm Street film. It was fitting. He was big at that time. I'll give that. That's a wink, wink, nod, nod cameo. But you know what? I kind of liked it because it made fun of kind of the 80s time period a little bit with the "This is my brain on drugs" commercial and all that stuff.
I learned it from watching.
Yeah, like all that stuff. Like I didn't mind that. That was okay. And but you know what? If we're clinging to that as the saving grace for this film, it shows you how bad it is.
I'm just going. These are kind of random because I was just randomly. Freddy suddenly has a daughter.
Oh yeah, that aggravated me actually.
What the hell?
That
really?
That actually angered me. That plot point came into it. After all these movies, that all of a sudden they discover it, and she's just wandering around, and she happens to be a therapist, whatever she is. I mean, come on.
Yeah. And then there's a point where Freddy does a cartwheel before the fight.
Oh yeah, of course, because it's the one thing he
does a He actually does a cartwheel.
Yeah, this took a lot. I mean, this really made it just went. It almost became like a parody of itself at some level. And whenever a horror movie does that, you're in trouble.
You have a great little cameo by Alice Cooper as Freddy's dad, which. At first, I was kind of like, oh, but then I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, now he could say that he was part of 2 major franchises. He did the song, he did Behind the Mask, for Friday the 13th.
I was like, at first I had lumped it in with the rest of this movie's craziness, but then I was like, I can't say anything bad about Alice Cooper.
No, that's Alice Cooper.
That's Alice
Cooper. You know what, actually, that would have been funny in Freddy vs. Jason if he made an appearance and, somehow, some a little nod to it that, he was part of both franchises at some level. It'd be kind of funny.
And then, of course, the famous 3D ending, which is really... It was weird that they didn't do the whole movie in 3D. They just did this one segment. Right. I remember being really pissed off about that. Because the way they marketed it kind of felt like the whole movie was going to be 3D, and then it's in this one little 10-minute segment.
And the funny thing, now I remember seeing it in the theater, and I still remember, and I still have this quote in my head. I don't know if it was on the package to the movie, or it was they said it when you went in, or there was a flyer or something, but I remember they said, when so-and-so puts on the glasses in the movie, you put them on as well. And I was just like, what? I'm like, I literally thought, I was like, what do you mean I put them on at that point? I'm like, so I'm going to carry this thing out through the whole movie, and wait for this girl to put on 3D glasses. And it's almost like the guy, Yaphet. There's another character, right? I like him in everything he's done since, and yet that movie, he seems so misplaced in it. And so and he has that line, even when he goes, here, use these. And she says, oh, come on. And, exactly what the audience is thinking, come on. You're giving me a cheap pair of 3D glasses, and this is going to get me into the dream world, so to speak. And she puts them on, and they disappear, and now the whole thing's in 3D. I mean, and listen, at that point, 3D was still a novelty, to some level. It's like, and it's funny, Nightmare on Elm Street, they waited a little bit. They waited until, all the way to the end to do it, But and then and the whole thing was I still remember reading an article about it, and they said the coolest thing is that Freddy will die in 3D, and that was just a horrible way. The way they finished that movie off, it's just so frustrating.
Yeah, the actual best part of this whole movie is the end credits.
Right, exactly.
They show clips from all the previous
Right,
movies.
that's about it.
And those are the best part of the movie.
It actually makes you a little sad. You're like, oh, remember when this was good?
Oh man, I remember when the series was actually really good.
Yeah, what happened? But
okay, so we had a little bit of a break, and we got 1990. Well, I didn't put the date on here, but it's 1994.
Yes, I believe so. And the reason why I remember it was either that it was 93 or 94 was because I was going to at San Francisco State at the time, and they actually had every so often they would play a movie. We'd get a special screener in like the Common Center that was out before the movie came out, and this was one of the movies that they aired. I remember we saw Rudy like a couple of weeks early, and this came out a couple of weeks early. We got it at the school to show it, and I remember I was ecstatic. I was so excited. I'm like, oh my god, look at this movie. We're getting this, and so it was really cool. So I went to see it, and I know some people think it's not great. I happen to really like this one.
Yeah, we're talking about Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
I know. I guess we should say what the title was, right?
Yeah,
I kind of jumped ahead. Sorry.
Which was clearly an attempt to at least give not. Obviously, it didn't start the franchise back up again because this was essentially the last Nightmare on Elm Street movie until Freddy vs. Jason. But it at least tried to give some good closure to the series,
right?
After the debacle that was part 6. So this one was directed by Wes Craven and written by Wes Craven.
This was,
so you knew it has some quality.
Right, he must have been just sitting there saying, I can't let my series go end like that. I can't have my one of my arguably my greatest creations sitting there playing with a Nintendo Power Glove.
Yeah, exactly.
I need something else.
So this one was really cool because it used a meta storyline in which Heather Langenkamp plays herself, Robert Englund plays himself, John Saxon plays himself, and they're all actors in the real world,
right?
And even Wes Craven plays himself, which was a little bittersweet.
And Bob Shea, and like all the people,
all of them. And it was a little bittersweet seeing Wes Craven on the screen because, of course, he passed recently, and but he's basically writing a new Nightmare movie, and as he's writing it, Heather Langenkamp starts to become impacted by Freddy, who is kind of a demonic force, like making its way into her real, quote unquote, real world, which is kind of a cool, really, really cool premise. I remember when I saw this, it kind of blew my mind,
right? Because
this wasn't really like a common. Nowadays, it would probably seem cliche, but at the time it was kind of a very novel concept.
It was, and it was
breaking the fourth wall,
right. And it was just so like you said, it was like, and none of the big horror series obviously had ever gone there. Like, it's not like you're gonna see Kane Hodder walking around fighting Jason or something. It would have been like that level of it. But none of those would have played that way. This, because Nightmare on Elm Street was always a much more of a, as we said, we've gone over this 100 times as we've talked about this with you. It's such a unique, series in that way. So this is a series where it could play off that way. And it's just, I love like the little nods, like at the funeral for Nancy's boyfriend or husband in the film, I guess, where you see the guy from Rob from the first movie, just in the standing there in there, as if he would have been there in real life. He obviously they probably still track. And thank God, like, because we didn't mention this when we went to part 3. I remember we talked about it. I think we touched on it last time, but like, thank God at least Heather Langenkamp grew back into her hair. And
yeah. So in part 3, I think we had mentioned that they tried to age her by like changing her hair color, like making a white streak in her hair.
Right.
Whatever. But of course, in this movie, she's actually her actual age at the time, which she looked fantastic.
Right, yeah, and I remember when I saw it at the time, I was like, oh my god, like, you know, you got that crush on her all over again, you know, when you saw her back on the screen, because, you know, you hadn't seen her in a while, and it was just like, you know, and she was always like, who didn't have a crush on her, you know, in the first movie, you know, you see that,
right?
So, and you know, and it was just, I just liked that. It was such a unique take on horror films at the time, you know, and I bet you half the people didn't, you know, seeing it now don't even realize that, you know, Bob Shaye played himself in it, and who is he? You know, it's like there's so many probably things that you know, unless you've been a true horror fan of the whole, and you know, through the whole series, you really got a lot of those nods.
And I'm sure Robert Englund enjoyed playing himself, because you never got to see him really. He was essentially Freddy for everything.
Right.
Like, you never got to really see him as an actor without the makeup and all that. So he really gets to play himself in this one, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and it's funny, they even had that one sequence where they totally basically summed up the whole franchise. You know, that was 100% intentional by Wes Craven when he surprised her on the talk show, and he's going out there, and you see little kids in there with Freddy masks on cheering him down. Now this is kids cheering on a child murderer. You know, it's a,
exactly. Yeah, it was a very biting commentary on the pop culture icon that Freddy had become.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool.
And I loved how even, like, you know, it took it to the level of Robert Englund you know, he kind of, you know, he's making those dark paintings and stuff, and it really just, I loved how the story, like, you know, the darkness of Freddy was kind of taking over the whole world of Nightmare on Elm Street, but the real world of Nightmare on Elm Street, which was kind of cool. So, right,
this one starred another famous child actor, which I'm gonna murder his name, Miko Hughes.
I think that's how you say it. I
think it's Miko.
Miko. I really.
Yeah, I think it's Miko.
Yeah.
But he was actually played Gage in Pet Sematary. That's where I first knew him from. And he's you instantly recognize him. He's been in numerous television appearances. And he's still a working actor. He's 31 now, so
good for him. He was.
Yeah, good.
He doesn't look anything like him. By the way, if you see what he looks like now, he's hardly recognizable as that little, like, cute little boy is
and that kid was the go-to for creepy kids.
He was. Hey, he was even funny. I don't know if you remember this movie, Cops and Robertsons. It was that Chevy Chase, Jack Palance team up movie.
Oh gosh,
he was in that, and he was obsessed with vampires. He was always, like, sleeping in the little, like, toy chest and stuff.
Well, Gage had to have been one of his first roles. I think he was, like, typecast as the creepy kid from then on.
And let me tell you, he was
scary.
Gage. Or Cage. How do you... Gage, right? Gage.
Gage.
It's scary. He was scary looking as a little kid.
That would be a good one to do. I'd love to revisit.
Yeah, we need to do, because
that was a great.
Yeah, that was one of a true movie that, like, I had trouble watching it. More than I've seen it a couple times, but I have trouble watching it because it's a little disturbing. Obviously with the premise of, with the kid getting run over and coming back, and it's just one of his and I don't know whatever that crazy aunt is, like, used to scare the hell out of me as a kid.
Yeah, I may have to that might be a good one for our Stephen King retrospective.
Right, and let's just forget the two existed.
Yeah, exactly. So that one was great. In fact, I was looking at some different rankings that people had done in the movies, and New Nightmare ranks right on up there, probably top 3 behind 1 and 3.
Yeah, I mean,
for some people,
it deserves just it really deserves respect more than even if you don't, you can't, even if you weren't one of your favorites, give it some respect. It was a bold choice to go that way, to bring it back.
And Freddy's actually scary.
He is. He's got the gray, like.
Yeah, he's got, like, these contact lenses and make his eyes look real evil.
Right.
He looks far more demonic than he typically does.
Yeah, he doesn't look like the pizza face, so to speak,
No. So they really tried to make a return to, like, the really scary Freddy. And really the only flaw I had with this movie was some of the effects are dated.
Yeah. It was some bad. Yeah, it was like, but
like some really bad green screen when they were doing, like, she was running through traffic at one point.
Oh, right.
It's just really, really terrible green screening and some stuff like that. But other than that, I mean, the movie's pretty darn solid, and I like the premise,
Right,
and of course the cast.
Yeah, and this was a little funny nod that I read. I did not come up with this on my own, so I'm not going to take credit. It was something I saw. I was researching the different facts for the movie. That in the first movie, and I remember I told you this, Tim, where in the first scene where Tina's talking to Nancy about her dreams, she goes on and she says, I don't know, maybe an earthquake is coming. That sometimes makes people have bad nightmares. And then they actually, whether it was intentional or not, I have to think it's Wes Craven, so it was probably intentional. They have the earthquake being a very big factor in the beginning of this film to almost like, oh, it's just an earthquake. Maybe that's what's making her have these weird visions or something.
Yeah, that had to be intentional because,
So I that's just a funny nod, and it's kind of cool that they did that. So, but yeah, and again, it's like, you got, you almost like, you fell in love with the characters again. Like John Saxon, I love how he, in real life, was almost like a fatherly role to Heather Langenkamp as he was to Nancy in the movie. And it just,
and still looked exactly the same.
He does. It's like, I not age? Holy cow, really?
No, that guy did not age. In 10 years, that guy had not aged a bit.
Yeah, I mean, he looked exactly the same. Like, you could literally clip the first Nightmare on Elm Street together with this one, with John Saxon scene. You would never know the difference.
Yeah.
Whatever he's got going on, like in terms of, I guess, body makeup. I want to look. I wish I could age like that. I tell you.
And that brings us finally to I'm sorry, not finally.
No, not yet.
Our next to last one, but and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this.
We'll go through it quick.
This one to me is, it belongs to both franchises. Right. So do you really count it? I don't know. That is, of course, Freddy versus Jason 2003, which we also covered in our Jason series.
Right. I mean, I think, though, it's more of a... And I remember reading this when it was coming out. I think it's definitely more of an Elm Street film than it is a Friday the 13th film. Because the whole premise is Freddy is trying to come back, and he recruits Jason to come back for him. So Freddy is the driver in this movie, obviously, at some level. And, the whole town, the whole basis with the hypnosis, it's definitely Freddy movie.
Well, he has to be. He's the only one that has any intelligence or whatever to interact.
Right. Can you imagine this was a Friday the 13th film trying to bring Freddy back? Like, what would Jason do? Like, start miming?
He's just like stumbling around. And
what would he do? Just hack open a tree that would pop Freddy out of it or something? Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, it'd be a really boring movie.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of... No, I was thinking this. Right, here's the only way that could be. It could be like he could be totally... Jason's just somehow goes to kill somebody in their sleep, and when he kills them, it goes to the sequence that they actually used in this, where it was Freddy's kill, supposedly, and then Freddy comes out, he goes, "Who's that?" Like, but either way, I actually, just, like we said, we won't go over it real too much, because we kind of touched on it, but I actually liked Freddy vs. Jason, the premise of it. I kind of liked how they tied it in. It was kind of cool. I liked the cast. I mean, you got Robert Englund, you didn't get Kane Hodder. Another reason why I think this, it's definitely more of an Elm Street film. I didn't like the model of Jason in it. I didn't like the way he, I don't know, he looked like the costume that you can get every year at Party City. Jason, didn't it? If you look at it, it was not like it was definitely like as far removed from a Tom Savini looking Jason as you can imagine. It was just, I did not like that Jason. I did, I liked the cast. Monica Keena, I was kind of had a crush on, so I'm glad she was in that. And you had some funny things. And Catherine Isabel, from the Ginger Snap series, so you had some horror cred in there. It just, it was fun. It was a fun movie. It was basically like a treat, like a present to fans of the two series, and that's what it was. That's what you got to take it at. It didn't really advance the mythology of either one of them. Like I think Tim had read, like you had read one time, right? That you could, depending on which ending you went to, like almost a clue, like you didn't know if you were gonna get Freddy win, Jason. I heard it around the same thing where they actually filmed 3 endings. You weren't gonna know which one until the very, to the last minute of the movie coming out, which one would win, and they obviously settled on the truce to set up the sequel that never came, unfortunately, because I think I would have liked to see what they did with it. But at this point in the day, you might as well kiss that sequel goodbye. That'll never come back. I did like how they did. Another reason why this is more of an Elm Street thing is, too, they had the hit missile and the Weston Hills place. I mean, they used more the obviously way more Elm Street stuff throughout the movie until the end when they went back to Crystal Lake. But there's some cool deaths. But that's what it is. We'll just leave it at that because I figure we had to cover it in a Nightmare on Elm Street because it was a Nightmare on Elm Street film more than it was Friday the 13th. So
yep. So that brings us to the much maligned Nightmare on Elm Street 2010 reboot, which they basically tried to do the same thing they had done with Friday the 13th a couple of years earlier.
Right. Which Friday the 13th worked a lot better in my opinion, but.
Yeah, it wasn't great, but it worked better, way better than.
Well, again, it's easier. It's an easier. Yeah, it's much easier. But
so it's directed by Samuel Bayer, written by Wesley Strick and Eric Heiserer. And again, I had not seen this one since it came out in 2010, right? Because I only watched it once.
I think same here.
So I tried to go in without any preconceived notions. I'm going to just judge it on its own merits. And Jackie Earle Haley, who plays Freddy in this one, is by far one of my favorite actors of all time.
Right, and we should probably make a point that this is in no way a slight on him in any way. He took what he had and probably did it to the best of anyone else other than Robert Englund could have done this. And I don't even think Robert Englund could have taken this material and maybe not they would have had to tweak it to better fit him because, especially with this. Which we'll get to with the design of the way Freddy looked in this. I don't even think he would have worked in it. But what he got, nothing against Jack Earle Haley because he's definitely one of the actors that just is amazing in everything he does. So this has nothing to do with him.
Yeah, it's just that he's not Robert Englund, right. Which is going to be true of everybody except Robert Englund.
Right.
So, but yeah, have you seen Jackie Earle Haley's work in Preacher? The series Preacher was just phenomenal. Loved him in that. But anyway, so they don't replicate the story this is scene for scene, but they do use there's some sequences that are ripped from the first movie, like the glove in the bathtub sequence. Right. And
there's some lines I think they quote exactly, right?
Yeah, there's some lines. There's of course the Tina in a body bag sequence, which is actually done pretty well in this one, actually. It was one of the few scenes that I actually was sort of impressed with. The opening sequence is actually really good.
Yeah. That was a good, that was nice. He gutted his throat out there. That was pretty,
yeah. The one main problem with this movie is it's just painfully slow. It's really bad pacing compared to the first film. I kind of actually was looking at the timer as I was watching it, and I realized that it basically took them around half an hour to get to the point that we had probably gotten to within 10 or 20 minutes of the first movie.
Well, that's anything with a remake and a reboot. That most of the time, that's what Friday the 13th did well, though. They kind of skipped right. You got right into where you needed to be in that movie, but. Through the opening credits, which was kind of cool. But yeah, this one is just, it seemed like they just wanted to drag it out and make its own footprint on it somehow. I mean, and if you look at the cast in this, it should have fared so much better than it did. Yeah, Rooney Mara. I mean,
oh yeah.
I mean, you got, you got Katie Cassidy. She was really good in Scribbler. I don't know if you saw that. You should check that out. That's a good one. She's been in some other stuff. You got Clancy Brown. I mean, you got some name people in this that, and the funny thing is they were all good in their spots, and Thomas Dekker, I think he was in the Terminator, right? I believe the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Yeah. So you got people that were good. So it was weird that it wasn't better than it was.
Yeah, it was one of those things where the cast unfortunately could not elevate the material this time around. And really, if we want to be honest, the primary flaw in this movie was Freddy. Jackie Earle Haley.
Not Jackie Earle Haley, Freddy.
Not Jackie Earle Haley himself. His makeup was horrendous. They tried to make him look realistically, he probably looks more like a realistic Freddy would.
Right.
They tried to do an actual burn victim type makeup, which means he's almost noseless. And I put on here, it looks like a lizard cosplaying as Lord Voldemort.
It kind of does.
What he looked like.
But
I saw descriptions. I was going back reading reviews just for fun, talking about how reptilian he looked.
He did,
and not in a good way.
Right.
It almost comes off. I don't want to say comical because there's nothing funny about burn victims, but it just looks. It's just bad. It's just bad. It doesn't come off right. And then the other thing that they did was they to their credit, they tried to bring back the scary Freddy,
right.
the menacing Freddy, and he's very menacing in this movie. But there's points where they still give him these one-liners to deliver. So he's like scary Freddy trying to deliver one-liners, and they just come off as completely flat,
right.
especially with the way Jackie Earle Haley delivers them.
Right,
and
yeah,
that's probably the direction, but it's just it was a weird combination of like just deadpanning these one-liners, and it did not work at
right.
all.
No, and they had this weird effect on his voice in it. They tweaked his, because I know Jackie Earle Haley can, he can manipulate his voice to some level, but it seemed like they had some kind of echo effect on his voice or something. And it was, and like Robert Englund, kind of when he would do his one-liners, it seemed more like realistic the way he would say it. It's like in this, it seems like it's like they literally like fed him a line because, let's give a nod to the original with a funny line in here. But here, and I think this is what really was part of the problem with this. Now, like I said, the original Freddy, it was supposed to be, the script was supposed to be, he was supposed to be a child molester and murderer. When Nightmare on Elm Street came out, they basically just changed it to strict child murderer. Not that that's, I mean, it's not like he's like a humanitarian now, but yeah, he was just strict child. But in this, it's like, it's even harder to get from a child molester and murderer to now a comical guy that you're going to laugh at if he says something. I mean,
and especially as much time as they spend on him pre-burn.
Right.
They do. There's a lot of sections where they're showing him interacting with the kids. I mean, they don't show anything, but I'm talking about, just like playing with the kids. And
right, and then they kind of
being this guy.
Yeah, and the worst thing was then they have that little subplot where they're trying to think that he was falsely accused. And I'm like, why go through so much in this? No, you know what? I know. Okay, I get it. It's a remake. You didn't want to do the same movie, right? But you didn't. Like you said, you wrote it here. It's a remake. They show too much backstory. We get it. Anyone that's going to see that movie knows the original. You don't need to do that much backstory. You want to take the original. I mean, I would have been even fine if they would have just took like a whole bunch of different characters. Yeah, like because they obviously based it on the first one that way. With but I would have been fine if they didn't even if they would have just started where we know who Freddy is now.
Just tell a new story.
Right, a new that's kind of what Friday the 13th did. It kind of like showed basically how Jason became to what he was at that moment, through the opening credits by showing that little montage of the mother getting killed and everything. And then, yes, you got to see him get his mask, which was fine. Fine, you want to do that. Okay, fine, I get it. But, that was it. They kind of basically took the Jason storyline from the middle. Already he was established at some level because they know, all right, we don't need to see his whole origin again.
A lot of people consider part 6 the worst one.
Yeah.
And this one notch above that one.
Yeah.
Which that's probably where I'd put it.
Yeah,
too.
I'd have to agree.
It's bad. It's not. It's bad because, like I said before, it's bad because it's not Robert Englund, which is not anybody's fault. But that character's just so iconic. It just proved that you can't redo Freddy like you can Jason and Michael Myers and all these other people. You just can't do it. You have to have that man behind the mask to pull that off, and this one just failed to do so.
Right.
And I'm not sure how many more times they could even try with other actors. I just don't think.
No, I don't think they could. I think, unfortunately, I hate to say it, unless Robert Englund came back, I think we're okay with no more Nightmare on Elm Streets. As much as I love it, you know what? I got the box set. I can revisit that first one. As we said, it still holds up. I don't need another one. It's fine. I'll enjoy the ones that I have over and over again. I'll make my order up. I'll go 1, 3, 4, 5. 5, skip to New Nightmare, and then I'm done. And watch Freddy vs. Jason because I like that. But yeah, so yeah, we don't. I think it's because like we said earlier, at some point, at one point the series became about Robert Englund as Freddy, not so much the Nightmare on Elm Street story at that point.
Right.
So to now reboot it and you take out the piece that made the franchise, you could put literally anybody in that role and they would pale in comparison. And you're talking about someone, when I heard that Jack Earl Haley was going to play Freddy, I said, you know what, if anyone's going to pull this off, he's one of the best you could have chosen for that. And like I said, it's no fault of his own. I don't blame him for that at all.
If he can't do it, I don't think anybody can.
I don't. Yeah, that's it. It's we had a good run, Freddy, but that's
Yeah. So that's the series in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And we'll get to some. We had a couple of general things here, just kind of quick mentions. You had a ride idea for Coaster Radio based on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise,
right? And I kind of had. I'll briefly go through it real quick because it was a long expedition. But basically, Tim actually won this contest the second time they had it. I came in, I was in the top 10, but mine didn't get advanced. But my idea, and I still want this to be done. So if anyone out here is listening has any kind of pull, I think this would be a cool idea. You basically, it's a giant indoor coaster where you basically go through the whole world of Freddy, including going through the mouth of the snake Freddy, and basically the whole point is you're in the nightmare world, and at the last finale of this ride is the big clock ringing and you wake up and you come out. But I had a whole cool thing with the setup where you're in the Weston Hills Sanitarium, and they find a new way now to basically get people to go into their dreams through a certain kind of hypnosis, to where you can control your dreams through the study of all the, blah, 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 the whole thing. And basically through the middle of the hypnosis, something goes wrong, and basically Freddy comes out and takes over, and then you're kind of, you go to the ride vehicle to kind of escape. And basically the guy breaks in through the technology, telling you, if you can just hold out until we can wake you up, you'll say, anyone that's seen the Universal or Disney rides has those cool storylines to it. That's the premise basically of it. And the guys loved it because I know Mike and EB are huge horror fans too, and they love 80s stuff, so they really liked it. But it did not win nevertheless. Tim won later on though with his 2 years later with his amazing creature from the Black Lagoon thing, which as fun. You should probably post that stuff up on our Facebook page or something.
Yeah, that might
people
be cool.
Should see that.
At least a picture of the trophy.
Yes, that took
else.
5 years to get right. Sorry, Mike and EB, we're just messing with it.
Let's see. We already mentioned the Freddy's Nightmare TV show, which is basically an anthology series, which was kind of bad because Freddy hosted it, sort of like the Crypt Keeper. Yeah, but not all the stories. In fact, most of them never featured Freddy. So it was kind of
if you think about it, the premise made sense. Freddy was a natural born host.
Yeah, that's true. But
it just
actually, there's quite a few episodes though. There's probably 50 episodes.
Yeah, I remember watching that way more than I did any of the Friday the 13th series. I gotta look for that on DVD and pick that up.
I did not know this. He appears in Ready Player One.
Yeah, in the trailer, if you look, one of the avatars was Freddy Krueger. So you could see in the sequence, it's like a Freddy avatar is jumping up towards the screen, and he one of the characters slices with his claw. So if you watch that trailer, you can keep an eye out for him. You'll see a little Freddy Krueger swinging in there, and it's great.
Now the Nintendo game I never got to play, unlike the Friday the 13th, which we've talked about.
Yeah, I remember playing it briefly. It was it was kind of interesting. It was kind of basically I just remember whatever character you played, you're walking through, and every so often what would happen is you had to collect things to keep you from falling to sleep, and once you did, you ended up in Freddy's dream world and had to fight stuff for a certain point until you could get back out into the regular world again. It was repetitive and it was very basic. I think that guy did it. That guy, Angry Video Game Nerd.
Oh yeah,
guy.
I'll have to go look that up.
Yeah, he did one on it. But by the way, his funniest one is Back to the Future, I think, though. And the Back to the Future, Friday the 13th are the two best he does. But yeah, so I think he does an episode on that. So you'd be able to see some footage on that. But that's a game I would love to. Now with the success of Friday the 13th, I'd love a reboot of a Nightmare on Elm Street game.
That would be
great. I know he's appeared in something, right? Didn't Freddy come in one of the games, like Mortal Kombat or something, or
there was one that had lists. That had some. It was a combat game
one
where they had some of the horror characters. Then we talked Nightmare on My Street, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, which we touched on briefly.
Yeah, and you can download that on iTunes. Actually, they have it, and I've been listening to it. It's funny. It's like the rapping itself is just so basic and cheesy, but it really is brilliant at the time. If you think about why they incorporated.
Well, the sample of the score is
sick.
It's like still pretty good.
Yeah, I love that and we never really touched on the score as a whole. But if you think about it, it was such a simple, haunting score that people. I don't think people realize how effective it was. That like, it's so. What is it, like 5 notes? And it was so great.
Yeah, it's very recognizable. Right. I'd put it right on up there with as far as being recognizable, up with Friday the 13th and
yeah. I mean, it's a shame. It's funny. That's the thing. It's like we've now talked about 2 episodes, almost a combined close to probably 3 hours worth of this, and we didn't even touch on the music because there's so much to these films. So, but I figured I should mention it quickly there.
Yep. Okay, now it's time for the rapid fire speed round, and unfortunately, me and Brian agree on a lot of these.
Yeah, so there's not going to be much disputing, but
anyway. So, favorite film, Brian, go.
Part 3, and the original, of course, but original goes first, but part 3 is a quick second, and I gave part 5 an honorable mention because, as I said before, had a crush on Lisa Wilcox, so I love the Alice shower scene to open the movie.
Yep, and I'm also going with the original followed by part 3. Yes. Least favorite film, Brian, go.
Well, let's see. If you couldn't guess by now, it, of course, is part 6 and the remake, but I will do the honorable mention of part 2 because, as we said, it just didn't hold up as the others did.
Yep, I agree. Part 6 to me was worse than the remake because at least the remake was separate from the franchise. Right, exactly. They were just trying to do a reboot, but part 6 had no excuse. So I agree with that. Favorite character, Brian, go.
Well, obviously, I mean, not to sound cliche, but Nancy, of course, because, she started all. And Alice, as I mentioned, and my other one is Kincaid, because he was, he just added that great comic relief and kind of fun character to Dream Warriors.
Yeah, my favorite was Will from part 3 because I was the D&D nerd in high school, so I really sympathized with his character, kind of the dork.
So anyone out there, if you fall asleep and you need a cool wizard to pull into your dreams, just reach out for Tim.
That's me.
So, along with dulcet tones, he has great wizard powers.
Least favorite character?
Everyone.
Yeah, that's. I was just reading Brian's answer.
Yeah, I put everyone from part 6.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. And then,
I had put Jesse from part 2 because as a lead, I expected a lot more, and he just didn't.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just didn't put him on there because, I mean, as I was going through these things, I saw, basically all our answers were almost identical. But, I mean, Jesse, part 2 as a whole, I had mentioned how I didn't like, so that's, but yeah, I agree with Tim on that one. Jesse from part 2, as a leading person, I think stands out, made him more, I think if he was one of the supporting characters, he would have been okay. Yeah. But yeah, as a lead, no, he does not work.
And nothing against Mark Patton, because he seemed like he was a nice guy at the convention, so I don't want to.
Oh yeah, no, like I said, I don't even begrudge him as an actor in that. It's the story and writing in that one. Just
yeah. So Brian, best Freddy one-liner.
Yeah, well, I have 2. I had the "How's this for a wet dream?" with the Joey sequence of the waterbed, which I just thought was I just love the sequence too. So the line was like a kind of a great capper to it. Yeah. And then obviously I hate to sound cliche, but the "Welcome to prime time, bitch." It was just so cool. Especially at the sequence was so cool. So that line just was another great capper to it.
Yeah, the prime time was my original, but then I decided I'm put a little more thought into it. So I went with "How sweet, fresh meat." Yeah. And the reason I went with that one is because, number one, you hear people say that. Well, I mean, I don't hear people say that all the time, but
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's a common saying, oh, here comes some fresh meat or whatever. But I thought it was it encapsulated Freddy's personality. It's slightly humorous, but it's also kind of a callback to his child killing ways, like sweet, fresh meat innocence.
Right, and think about it. It referred to basically Alice coming into the franchise as now a character. So it's like,
right. So I just thought it summed up his personality.
Yeah, no, it was great. It's definitely I mean, you have a lot of lines. I mean, and I was like, even an honorable mention with the "got your nose." I don't know why that one made me laugh all the time too.
All right, and best kill.
Yeah, Tim and I actually kind of agree on this one. I just have to say, I love the puppet kill just because, as we said, it kind of gave for one of the earlier times where Freddy was kind of like way larger than life, to like the point where he was this giant visual of Freddy over the thing. Was just a really cool shot to begin with. It was just so creepy looking as Big Freddy. And the original Tina kill, I think, was just because at the time, like, it was so, it was so, for regular typical slasher films like that, to see that kind of cool scene. Literally, she's getting dragged up on we made a joke, dancing on the ceiling, but it was just a really well done scene, and it was just so cool. And the fact that they even mimicked it for the remake, of course, and it's out. And one of the honorable mentions I'll give is the bug kill when that weightlifting girl and Dream Master basically turned into Bug, cool. And then Freddy just crushed her in the roach motel. I mean, that was just a brutal kill if you think about it.
Yeah, I have to admit that one caught me by surprise. I had not remembered.
Yeah.
That. But, so what was our beer pairing this week?
Oh, you didn't do your best kill. You didn't get to say it.
Oh, that's right. Oh, mine was the puppet guy, because when I was thinking back to, like I said, when I was looking at all the kills, like that one just stood out in my mind. Even after I had not seen 3 in forever, that one still stood out in my mind. So that's why it gets that mention as my favorite.
Yeah, and that one is just, literally, the guy is using his veins as strings.
Oh, yeah, it was just cringe inducing.
Yeah, that was just great. And the fact that all the people are watching it happen, like all his friends are watching it, just great. That was a great one. Hats off to them who wrote that one. Wes.
All right, so beer pairing.
Yeah, so there was a couple. There's actually, it's funny. I went through a couple of them. There was one that was like something like, it was actually, the beer was called Nightmare on East Elm Street, but it was a kind of a one-off thing they did, and it had nothing to do with Nightmare on Elm Street. It was just a play on it because I guess the East Elm Street was literally the name of where the brewery is on. So I didn't think about. So I was trying to find something that was actually attainable. And I did. It's called Nightmare IPA. It's their signature IPA by Old Saratoga Brewing Company up in Saratoga, New York. I want to say Julie went there, but she says she doesn't remember if that was the brewery she went to or another one up there. But so that's one I'm going to keep an eye out for because it's probably available around New York area. So, and it's an IPA, and Tim and I love our IPAs. So I thought it was a perfect one, Nightmare IPA by Old Saratoga Brewing Company.
Cool. So we promised you the answer to our trivia question in this episode, so we will do that. Night of the Living Dead was the first film to be filmed in a specific city. Name that city. And the answer was Pittsburgh, and listener Cody got the answer. She pointed out that Evans City was where the cemetery scene was filmed. So props for her for getting the answer this week.
Yeah, and
that was an interesting one.
Yeah, because you figure, technically, Evans City, it also may have been the first thing ever filmed in the city. So I was kind of saying, because she wrote to us and pointed that out, and I said, that's true. I said, really, we should have worded major city in the question, but to get the answer, but she still got the answer, so yeah, so she's definitely getting props for that.
And this week's trivia question is an interesting one.
Yeah.
And it is not Freddy's Nightmare.
No. Yes.
What was the name of Freddy Krueger's one-off MTV show in 1988?
Yeah, this one I remember it. I didn't remember it having a name. That's what's funny.
That's how obscure.
Yeah, that's how obscure it was. I thought it was just literally him on MTV one day, but apparently it was a legit show that had a name.
So, Brian, should we give a hint as to what next week lies in store, or should we just leave them guessing?
I don't know. Let's see. I'm thinking about it, and I think maybe we'll just send out a teaser this week.
Okay, yeah, we'll send out a teaser. So watch for us on Facebook at facebook.com/Civil Gore Podcast. We're on Twitter at Civil Gore Pod. You can write us at Gmail, civilgorepodcast@gmail.com. All these are in the show notes, so when you download an episode, you'll see links to all of our social media platforms, which is why we don't always cover them on the show. But we'd appreciate it if you leave us an iTunes review, give us some feedback, interact with us. We love that kind of stuff, and we look forward to hearing from you guys every week.
Yeah, and so I hope you guys are enjoying to the Summer Slaycation series, because I know we're having a lot of fun doing it, and it was good. When Tim came up with the idea for that, it was so great because it really is a good way to cover not just the individual movies and the franchise that we love, but the whole franchise as a whole. And it was a great way to do it in little 2-week segments. And I think it's fun because it still stays with our format, but giving you guys an extra little treat and going over the whole series. So I hope you guys like it. So if you do, though, definitely let us know, because we'll continue it next year.
Yep. Okay, well, I guess we'll sign off because I'm getting tired.
Yeah, this has been a long one. This has been definitely a stretch, and
I can't hold my eyes open, Brian.
Well, you don't want to fall asleep.
I'm going to go to sleep.
No, don't fall asleep.
No.
Don't, Tim. No! Well, hopefully Tim will stay awake, and we will see you guys next week.
Later, guys.